with our big breaking news that Chris and I were just talking about, and it is stunning just how far the Trump administration was willing to go to hunt leaks, using their power to put down perceived political enemies. It is disgusting. It is toxic. It is shocking, but not surprising. CNN has confirmed the Trump DOJ took the extraordinary step of seizing records from Apple, targeting Democrats on the House Intel Committee, their aides, and even their family members, one of them a minor child. Vile. The New York Times reporting records from at least a dozen people, including Adam Schiff, were seized as the DOJ hunted for the sources behind news media reports on contacts between Trump associates and Russia. Congressman Schiff putting out a statement tonight saying President Trump repeatedly and flagrantly demanded that the Department of Justice carry out his political will and tried to use the department as a cudgel against his political opponents and members of the media. It is increasingly apparent that those demands did not fall on deaf ears. The politicization of the department and the attacks on the rule of law are among the most dangerous assaults on our democracy carried out by the former president. Though we were informed by the department in May that this investigation is closed, I believe more answers are needed, which is why I believe the Inspector General should investigate this and other cases that suggest the weaponization of the law enforcement by a corrupt president. Adam Schiff putting out that statement tonight and was just on Chris's show moments ago. Let's remember what the then president said in February 2020, accusing Adam Schiff of leaking information about Russia's election interference.
And frankly, I think it's disgraceful. And I think it was leaks from the Intelligence Committee, House version. And I think that they leaked it. I think probably Schiff leaked it, but people within that, Schiff leaked it, in my opinion. And he shouldn't be leaking things like that. They ought to stop the leaking from Intelligence Committee. And if they don't stop it, I can't imagine that people are not going to go after them and find out what's happening.
Wow, projection. Every time he said something about someone else was true about him. Still is. So in just the past few days, we have learned this. We've learned about Donald Trump, the DOJ seizing Apple's records of Adam Schiff and others. We learned the Trump administration waged a months-long secret court battle to get records from my colleague, CNN's Barbara Starr. We learned that Mark Meadows sent 5 emails to the then acting attorney general trying to pressure him to investigate ridiculous claims of election fraud. We heard new audio of Rudy Giuliani pressuring Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden. This is all recent. This is all just within the last couple of days, weeks. It's shocking. We thought it was bad, but we didn't even know the half of it. We have a lot more ahead tonight on this story. We're going to dig in more. And this story is coming as we are also getting some stunning revelations about the January 6th insurrection. That's when those, look at your screen, violent Trump-supporting rioters stormed the United States Capitol trying to stop the certification of the vote. The FBI director, Christopher Wray, says virtually none of those rioters were on their radar before the attack.
As far as individuals actually under investigation, now that we're close to 500 arrests into the matter, you may be surprised to learn that, in fact, almost none of the individuals charged and found to be involved with the attack on the Capitol were, in fact, individuals who were previously present under investigation.
Almost none of them. Again, that is shocking. And it raises some disturbing questions. The FBI has said the threat from domestic terrorism is metastasizing. Yet they had no idea any of these people would attack the Capitol? How much are we underestimating the threat? I should say we. How much are they underestimating the threat? How much are we still underestimating it? Director Wray saying there will be a lot more charges to come.
We are treating it as an act of domestic terrorism and investigating it through our Joint Terrorism Task Force. We are, as you know, now in the midst of bringing any number of conspiracy charges, which are particularly serious. But this is a very ongoing investigation, and there's a lot more to come, and I would expect to see more charges, and some of them may be more serious charges.
He is also saying that the Bureau is investigating the most, listen to this, the Bureau is investigating the most hate crime incidents in 5 years.
Hate crimes are certainly a high priority for us. We, in fact, had from fiscal year 19 to fiscal 20, a 63% increase in FBI hate crimes investigations opened. And this year, fiscal year 21, we've had the highest number of hate crime investigations initiated in the past 5 years.
We've got more to come on that story, too. That, as what's happening right now, tells you everything you need to know about the state of our politics, everything you need to know about the limits of bipartisanship. 10 senators, 5 Republicans, 5 Democrats, saying tonight that they have got a deal on infrastructure, one that would be fully paid for and not include tax increases. A source telling CNN includes $578 billion in new spending and would cost a total of $1.2 trillion over 8 years. The White House sounding cautiously optimistic, by the way, saying the deal is worth exploring. A spokesman saying that they'll work with the bipartisan group, but, quote, questions need to be addressed. Meanwhile, selling it to the Senate is a whole nother thing. They still need every single Democrat to vote for it, and they still need at least 10 Republicans to vote with them, which is far from a sure thing. Remember what happened when Senate Republicans blocked the January 6th commission to investigate the insurrection? 54 senators voted yes, but they fell short of the 60 votes they needed. You can win a vote and still lose. A lot more to come on our breaking news tonight. Revelations that the Trump Justice Department subpoenaed Apple for data from the accounts of House Intel Committee Democrats, including Adam Schiff, along with staffers and their family members. Breaking news tonight, the Trump Justice Department seized records from Apple for data from the accounts of Democrats on the House Intelligence Committee, as well as aides and family members as prosecutors investigated leaks. So let's discuss now. Congressman Eric Swalwell is here. He's a California Democrat who is a member of the committee. Representative, thank you for joining us tonight. This is really an astounding and unprecedented. You sit on the House Intelligence Committee. Records from at least a dozen people seized, including from aides, family members, even a minor. Do you have reason to believe that they sought your records as one of among 100 accounts? Have you been notified of that by Apple or anyone?
I was notified, Don, by Apple that they did seize my records. It's wrong. This is what they do. They smear and they try and clear. We've seen this through the Justice Department by Donald Trump, whether it was the reason he was impeached for trying to go after Vice President Biden at the time, or just other efforts, through the Mueller investigation. And I support Chairman Schiff's call for an Inspector General report into not only this conduct, but other conduct that was corrupt by Donald Trump and those who worked for him.
The reporting is that among the numbers obtained were family members, and as I said, even a minor. Do you know that to be true? And why would they be targeted?
I do know that to be true, and I believe they were targeted punitively, not for any reason in law, but because Donald Trump identified Chairman Schiff and members of the committee as an enemy of his. And just like Vladimir Putin or Erdogan or Xi and China, he used the power of government corruptly to go after his perceived political opponents. We can't allow that to happen again, Don. This is not a 500-year flood. As we speak, he is telling others that he will be reinstated in August, and he has people who are willing to, bring violence, collect arms, and come to the Capitol to try and make that true. So it's a fragile time for our democracy.
Yeah, it certainly is. Do you know how long this went on and when it began?
It looks like it originated back in 2017 to 2018 period. That aligns with the CNN, New York Times, Washington Post. But I don't know much more beyond that other than it's closed. The matter's closed. And of course it's closed because we did nothing but our jobs, and we followed the rules that we were supposed to follow in our investigation that showed that Donald Trump and his team sought to have assistance from Russia, planned to benefit from it, and constantly, as president, governed in a way that put Russia's interests ahead of America's.
Does it make sense to you that the Justice Department goes to a judge with a request to seize data on members of Congress, and that a judge was willing to sign off on that, a co-equal branch of government?
It concerns me, and that's why I support the chairman's call for an inspector general report. Don, look, I'm not above the law, just like no one else is above the law. But to go after this many people, boy, that feels like a Donald Trump-driven investigation, and I don't have a lot of faith in his ability to fairly interpret the law.
So we know that they went after reporters, and now we are learning about elected officials and elected officials too, and that they put a gag order in place for Apple so those lawmakers wouldn't know that it was even happening. Why were they able to get these gag orders?
Because they rightfully were afraid of the public perception that they were targeting their political enemies. Now, it's not law, Don. It's actually Supreme Court precedent that allows these gag orders, but they have to be renewed after 1 year. And it looks like they were renewed a number of times. And thankfully, the Biden administration, it looks like, did not renew it. But again, we don't know enough yet, but it is concerning that they continued to seek our records with no evidence that there was any wrongdoing other than we were calling the president out for his corruption.
Adam Schiff, the chairman, was on with Chris, and also he is calling on the inspector general to investigate. What needs to come out of this? I mean, as you know, the DOJ has extraordinary authority. Are there any guardrails to keep this from happening? I can't believe that as I said, a judge signed off on it, and then they were able to get gag orders. I mean, are there any guardrails? What the hell's going on here?
Yeah, we need a cleanup crew for what Donald Trump did with his wrecking ball to our democracy. Adam Schiff also has the Protecting Our Democracy Act, which puts a lot of reforms in place. But there's so much more that we have to do to give the Department of Justice independence from any president, Republican or Democratic president's own political preferences. And clearly they were abused by Donald Trump. We can never go back to that, but we're dangerously close if we do nothing.
You think we're dangerously close, or are we already there?
Well, we had a president who abused his power, Don, went after his political enemies, sent a violent mob to try and kill his political enemies to overturn an election. So, yeah, we're already there. Thankfully, we survived. I don't think we'll survive again.
All right. Thank you, Representative. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
So we have a lot more in our breaking news. Representative Swalwell has confirmed to me that his records were seized by the Justice Department. You just heard him. The Trump DOJ seizing records on at least a dozen people, even a minor child, in their hunt for leaks. Stay with us. So here's our breaking news tonight. The revelation that the Trump DOJ subpoenaed Apple for data from accounts of Democrats on the House Intel Committee, their aides, even family members, including a minor child. The records seized, including from Adam Schiff, and as we just learned now, he just told us, Eric Swalwell. Let's discuss now. CNN's chief political analyst, Gloria Borger, is here, the perfect person to talk about this. Gloria, good evening. This is outrageous.
Hi. It is. Look, I think this may be and is the worst abuse of power we have seen from Donald Trump, and that is really saying something. This is a president who was using the Justice Department as his own private investigators, and who decided that he ought to investigate the people who were investigating him. How outrageous is that? It makes Nixon's enemies list and Watergate itself look like small beans. That's how outrageous this is.
So listen, the former president, we know that he always believed that the Justice Department, right, was his own, that he could use them
Sure.
In any way that he wanted to for his own political purposes. And now look at what we're learning now. Okay, we talked about that. This is the news tonight. But we learned that CNN and other news organizations, the pressure that that he sought the records for that, the pressure that Mark Meadows put on the DOJ to investigate election fraud, the situation with Ukraine and Rudy Giuliani. I mean, when you put it all together, I mean, the enormity of the abuse is just astounding.
Well, I think he looked at the Justice Department like he looked at the Trump Organization. They worked for him. They didn't work for the American people. So I think the question we have to ask here is, Jeff Sessions, according to the New York Times, started this. The folks in the Justice Department, 4 of whom remain, by the way, I believe, did the investigation. They thought it was going nowhere. And then Attorney General Barr revived it, bringing someone into the Justice Department to further investigate it. The question is, what did Barr see that nobody else could see? Why did he decide to do this? And the question is, what can anyone do about this? And so I think everyone has to kind of ask these questions. Also, the fact that there were these long gag orders placed, such as was placed on the attorney for CNN, David Vigilante, who had a year-long gag order. Was this an abusive gag order? Senator Ron Wyden of Oregon tonight said we're gonna take a look at this because this is ridiculous. And so I think that there are so many questions that need to be asked and answered so that this cannot happen again. The Justice Department cannot be a wholly owned subsidiary of a president of the United States to be used for his political purposes and his political investigations. I mean, Congress's job is to oversee. If they were doing their job and he didn't like what they were doing, that's too bad.
You know, I'm wondering, what type of investigations can come out of this, Gloria, considering the egregious nature of what has happened? And there are things I'm sure we don't know about that are yet to come.
Right. And I think, you know, they're going to be peeling the layers of the onion here. And we're going to see what we get down to, because I wouldn't be surprised if we continue to learn more and more. But I'm asking myself the same question that you're asking, which is, how do you investigate this? And how can you try and put some guardrails on here? You know, in the old days, you didn't think you needed guardrails like this, but it's obvious that you do. So what can Congress do? Well, they can have an Inspector General investigation. The Inspector General can take a look at this. That takes a long time, and say, well, this is what went wrong. They can try and change the rules regarding gag orders, for example. But can someone sue the Justice Department? I mean, these are public officials here. Maybe the secondary people could, the people who were staff. I mean, I'm not an attorney and I don't pretend to be one, so I'm not quite sure what the legal remedies would be. But if you were, say, a second level, third level staffer, and you discovered that your private text messages had been investigated and by the Justice Department, you'd hire a lawyer, and you would try and figure out what you could do about that, because I think you would feel violated by this, and you'd want to know some answers. Congress ought to haul up Barr.
What are the implications for Barr?
Maybe they'll have a subpoena fight.
I know you said you're not an attorney.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I think.
Yeah.
Right. He has to answer questions of why he revived what seemed to be a dormant investigation.
Right.
And maybe he had a reason for doing that, but he brought in somebody from the outside to deal with it. Why did he do that? Did he do that because the president said, "Hey, I'd like you to help me out here"? You know, Barr was somebody at the end of his tenure who said, you know, there wasn't any fraud in the election, so he didn't follow Trump on that route. Why did he follow him on this route earlier on in his tenure? Did he feel the pressure? Did he see something? I mean, there are so many questions that need to be answered, and the Inspector General is obviously going to have to answer it. But you know, people's civil rights may have been violated. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but this raises so many questions and just
Gloria?
lets you get a real insight into Donald Trump and how he operates.
Well, that's what I want to ask you, because if listen, the lawmakers and the people whose records they were looking for work for the people. And many times lawmakers communicate with their constituents. So it's not just about the lawmakers' records.
Sure.
If you texted or emailed your congressperson, your congressman or congresswoman, then your text messages, maybe you had a personal issue that you wanted to talk to your representative about, something that you needed fixing, and you thought you had their confidence, or they had your confidence. Well, not anymore.
Sure.
So the average person, the average
Sure.
citizen, should be really concerned about this. It's not just about lawmakers.
Confidential conversations with constituents, with family members, with even members of the press. Donald Trump, as you know, was obsessed with these leaks, and he made no secret of it. You just played that tape. He told the public about it. He said Adam Schiff is the one leaking about this. I know this. Well, did he know this? What did he know, and when did he know it, as the question goes? Or was it just his suspicion? And he said to the Justice Department, his own private investigators, I want you to take a look at this. I want you to find this out for me. I want you to report back to me, because these are my enemies. Nixon only made a list. He made a list. This is very different from Watergate, and worse, because it is an abuse of power by the President of the United States. I think that is the only way all of us who are reading this in the New York Times can look at this and say, if all of this is accurate, why did the President of the United States think that he had the authority on a whim to say to the Justice Department, which works for the people, that I want you to investigate my enemies? Did he start looking at people's tax return? We have no idea what he was doing.
Yeah.
Again, I think there are layers of the onion that we're going to continue to peel here, as we should, and find out just what was going on that we did not know about. Apple, of course, was under a gag order. And we need to continue, for history, if nothing else, to find out what these abuses were.
Yeah. For everything you just said and more is why we love having you, the perfect person to discuss this. Thank you, Gloria. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Don.
Thank you.
Thanks, Don.
He says the GOP is waging a war on democracy, and now it is a daily fight to preserve it. Pennsylvania's lieutenant governor is fighting election misinformation in his state, and he's here next. So the White House saying questions need to be addressed, after a group of 10 senators reached a bipartisan deal on infrastructure. But with a possible agreement on the table, will it give new life to the push for bipartisanship on other parts of Biden's agenda, including voting rights? My next guest says protecting the right to vote is above politics, and that to believe the current GOP will act in good faith is naive. So joining me now is Pennsylvania's Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman. Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. Good to have you on. I appreciate it. So listen, I'd like to first get your reaction to what we're learning tonight about the abuses of power on the part of the Trump Justice Department. Are you familiar with the story about
yes,
requesting and then seizing records and Apple complying? Go on. What do you think?
I just think it's consistent with the behavior that you've seen from that administration during its time in power, and I can't say that I'm shocked or surprised. This is an administration that pushed the bounds of legalities and taste and normalized lying about basic election results. So, I can't really say that anything, quite frankly, along those lines would surprise me.
The same thing. I said it's horrific. It's abusive. I said it was shocking, but not surprising, considering the actions of this administration, not just over the past 4 years, but the past 5 years, since even before he made that trip down the escalator at Trump Tower.
Certainly. Well, if you're willing to debase the entire American democratic system, that it's, pretty much anything's game.
What should happen, you think, Lieutenant Governor? What do you think? Should there be any consequences, investigations, not only for the former president, but for the Attorney General as well, and the Justice Department?
Well, I certainly think it's something that would need to be investigated, but I wouldn't look to that the Republicans would express an equal amount of enthusiasm for investigating that, and it just would turn into a back and forth. And the bottom line is that these kind of revelations are going to continue to emerge because it was an administration that held itself above the law and was willing to lie, manipulate, and cajole, and it might even sound like even break the law from what it sounds like is emerging.
Yeah. I want to talk, Lieutenant Governor, about this great piece that you have on CNN.com. And you say some Democrats like Manchin, who are refusing to reform the filibuster, are telling us that allegiance to a flawed Senate rule is more important to them than democracy itself. They are wrong. Why?
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, I live fairly close to the West Virginia border. I'm familiar with the state, what it's like there, and of course, Senator Manchin is a far better option than a Republican from West Virginia. But at the end of the day, you're in a situation to ratify these generational, life-changing pieces of legislation. And, you really need to come together as Democrats. I mean, and when you see what you've seen what the Trump administration was willing to do, and even as it came out just recently tonight, I mean, we need to band together. I would gladly, pay any political price back home if that were the case to bring these amazing pieces of legislation that we need, whether it's minimum wage, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's police reforms, voting protections. All these things are so critical, and that will affect this country for generations.
Lieutenant Governor of Pennsylvania, John Fetterman, joins us now. Governor, I appreciate it. And if you have any more interested in what he said, read the piece on CNN.com. Again, a quote from it says, some Democrats like Manchin, who are refusing to reform the filibuster, are telling us that allegiance to a flawed Senate rule is more important to them than democracy itself. They are wrong. Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. The next vaccine misinformation at an Ohio Health Committee meeting you've got to see to believe. Okay, so the pandemic may be nearing an end in the U.S., but misinformation about the vaccine still spreading all across the U.S., like the wildly false claim that COVID vaccines make people magnetic. And I'm not making this up. At an Ohio State House hearing just this week, one woman who happens to be a doctor testified to that very idea.
I'm sure you've seen the pictures all over the internet of people who've had these shots and now they're magnetized. They can put a key on their forehead, it sticks. They can put spoons and forks all over them and they can stick, because now we think that there's a metal piece to that.
But that's not all. A nurse who also spoke at the hearing tried and failed to prove that she is now magnetic.
Yes, vaccines do harm people. By the way, so I just found out something when I was on lunch, and I wanted to show it to you. We were talking about Dr. Tenpenny's testimony about magnetic vaccine crystals. So this is what I found out. So I have a key and a bobby pin here. Explain to me why the key sticks to me. It sticks to my neck, too. I got this. Yeah, so if somebody can explain this, that would be great. Any questions?
Sorry. Okay. It's really not funny. It's laughable, but not funny. Well, maybe it is a little funny. The CDC having to put out a fact check debunking the totally wackadoo claim. So joining me now, CNN medical analyst Dr. Jonathan Reiner, the director of the Cardiac Catheterization Program at GW University Hospital. Doctor. What is going on in this country?
Yeah, my dad would have called that Meshuggah, which is Yiddish for whack. But I actually don't think it's that funny, because, Dr. Tenpenny, and she's actually a doctor. Dr. Tenpenny is talking to very receptive ears. There's a huge number of folks in this country that are very leery of vaccines. And what she has also said at other times that, wrongly, that vaccines cause infertility in men and women. She's linked these things to, globalists, which is obviously an anti-Semitic kind of trope.
Yeah.
She's talked about depopulation, eugenics. So she's a fringe character, but she's talking to very receptive ears. And she's talking to people in states that are lagging way behind other parts of this country in vaccinations. So, for instance, in parts of the South, barely, 40% of people are fully vaccinated compared to a national average of 53%. If you look at states that have more than 70% of adults with at least one shot, we have 13 states with that. There are parts of the South, where that's barely 50%. So we have a long way to go, and she's talking to very, very receptive ears. It's not funny, it's dangerous.
Look, listen. I mean, that woman, if you look at it, I know it's not funny, but if you look at her, should we feel bad for the woman who has been co-opted, or people who are being exploited by so-called experts who would have someone like that actually going into a committee hearing and trying to put keys on them to prove their point? And I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't be laughing at it, but I mean, I find it's ridiculous when you look at it. It's ridiculous.